Okay, 1, 2, 3. Does this help me at all?
No. Not really.
Maybe it's not on. Oh, it's not on. Sorry, that should be a little better, I think.
That's better.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Bianca Farr. I work for the Department of Mental Health in Jefferson City, and I'm here to introduce the speaker this morning. Before I do that, I want to just let you know, many of you came in the room, and I'm guilty as well, and it was cold.
Yes.
So just letting you know, you should be starting to warm up a little bit. They're trying to blow her off. If you get too warm, let us know. Okay, so I am going to introduce to you Sergeant Joseph Matherne, Sr. Sergeant Matherne has been a law enforcement officer for 28 years and has served in several different capacities. In 2005, he was promoted to sergeant and serves in that capacity today. Sergeant Matherne currently supervises the department's community action team, which is a twofold unit. They are responsible for community policing as well as narcotics enforcement. Sergeant Matherne also serves as the chairman for the Capital Area Crisis Intervention Team. Sergeant Matherne graduated from the Missouri Police Chiefs Association Command College and received a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice Administration from Columbia College. So, without further delay, I want to present to you Sergeant Matherne. I do have one more announcement real quick. I forgot what number it is.
7 and 12.
So I'm number 7 on your sheet. I'll be at my booth, Department of Mental Health booth, which is next to the books that are for free in the Piccadilly room. And Sergeant Matherne has to leave after this session, so we're going to do the stamp while you're in the room. Okay, so if you just have your sheet out, I'll come by and stamp
it. This is Officer Josh Hagemeyer. He actually works in my unit of the community action team. I think he's going to kind of go around and make sure you get everything stamped. So I'm going to say that microphone on. I'll start out kind of let you know where the police department lies, first of all, in mental health issues. As with a lot of things in law enforcement, this is one of the areas that we have recently. Can you hear me okay, or do I? They can't. We'll see how this works out because I walk around a lot. So one of the areas we've been tasked with in law enforcement, of course, is dealing with folks who have a mental health crisis. So the way we do that is we have what is called a crisis intervention team. And currently in Missouri, pretty much every county, with the exception of about 5, has a crisis intervention team of some sort. So what a crisis intervention team in law enforcement is it consists of a group of officers who go through a 40-hour training specifically on how to deal with folks who are in a mental health crisis. Now, this ranges from identifying different types of mental health diagnoses, as well as how to handle that person, where to obtain proper resources for that person. I turned mine off. So currently in Jefferson City, as an example, we have about roughly 90 officers, and about 25 of them or 30 of them are part of this team that are trained in dealing with folks in a mental health crisis. So part of the training we go through, there's a class, and I'm going to kind of plug it to you. This stuff that I'll go over with you today is a little bit, some of it's from that class, but this class is called Mental Health First Aid. Has anybody ever heard of Mental Health First Aid? Has anybody ever attended? You attended? Okay. So then she's going to know some of what I'm talking about. This is not the class. The class is an 8-hour class, and it covers the key mental health issues in the United States, and it teaches you how to speak to persons, how to get them help, and how to basically render first aid to a person in a mental health crisis. So what it does is it's just as simple as, like, you render first aid when someone is injured, and you kind of put a Band-Aid on the problem and get them to a person who can actually help them further. That's what mental health first aid does. It's just first aid for folks who are in a mental health crisis. It doesn't teach anybody how to diagnose a mental health issue, and it doesn't teach you how to resolve those issues. You would never learn that. But this is going to give you a little bit of a taste of that, and I encourage you to go forth. They want everybody to become mental health first aid in the United States, because you never know when you may come across someone who is in a mental health crisis. A lot of folks that don't even know that they have a mental health issue. And some of the things that we talk about, you don't really realize that, you associate that with a mental health. But it is classified as a mental health. So I want to start out. What does anybody have a definition of what they think a mental health issue is? Dementia, so that's a type.
Get depressed.
Depressed.
Not remembering
I don't have
anything.
no way to move this. So if we define it, is kind of what I was looking for. So if we define it, a mental health illness is a diagnosis of an illness that affects a person's thinking, emotional state, and behavior. It disrupts their ability to work, carry out daily activities, and engage in satisfying relationships. So I have a little quiz I'm going to pass around. Does everybody have something to write with? I'm going to pass around a little quiz, and it's called the mental health. This lady who's been through it, she's going to have seen this little quiz before. We get Officer Hagemeyer to help me if you would.
Yeah. Can I make a statement, please?
Yes, sir.
Dementia and Alzheimer's is not mental health issue. That's a disease.
We learn it though as part of this. So we do learn that as part of our mental health training. While it is classified as a disease, we still in the world that we learn in, we learn it as part of our mental health training.
Because it's a behavioral issue, but that's a misnomer. That's not.
Yeah. It's just like they, for the purposes of this, they classify substance abuse as a mental health disorder too. And typically in law enforcement, we never classified substance abuse as a mental health disorder, but they now do. So this is a little quiz that Officer Hagemeyer is going to pass around. Like everybody take this a couple of minutes, fill it out. It's basically an opinions quiz. We're going to kind of see where everybody, where their knowledge is on mental health.
I'm trying to pass it out.
Okay.
A little slow. Some of
Maybe
you,
I can start some here. You want to grab some around?
I think we're gonna run out.
I got one. Did everybody get one?
No, one more back
I
here.
think they're coming. Oh,
We're missing one here.
okay.
Was there 100? How many? Two?
Three. I couldn't say.
So we're gonna fill these out, and then we're gonna cover some material, and at the end, we're gonna go over these and see where you work. And some of the stuff that's on this, we're gonna cover as we go along. But I'm gonna give you a few minutes to go ahead and circle your answers.
Sure. This? No.
All right.
Maybe somewhere.
Does everybody have something to write with? No. I don't know how many pens I got. I have 3 extra. Who else is over here?
She got one.
You want to stay?
She already got one.
She got one, all right.
What am I supposed to do with a?
They even say mental health first aid on them, so.
Oh, I'll take it.
You'll take it, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and circle your answers now. We'll give a couple minutes and I'll start back talking and you can continue on to that if you don't get done with it. All right, so while you finish up a little bit, we're going to go ahead and move to the slideshow here, and then we'll discuss these at the end and see where we're at the end after we go through some of the material. So why should we be concerned with mental health problems today? Of course, I've got a list that's going to come, but if you have something to share, why do you think we should be concerned with mental health problems?
It can happen to anyone.
Very good answer. It can happen to anyone. So with that, she actually kind of hit on the first key. Mental health problems are common. Mental health problems are a lot more common today than most people realize they were. So why do you think? I mean, can everybody agree that here recently we hear more and more about mental health issues in the news and we hear more about it? So why do you think that is? Why do you think that all of a sudden? Do you think that just now in 2015, 16, 17 that people started being, started having mental illness and not before? Why do you think that is?
I think people are more willing to talk about it as I'm thinking
In a community, yes.
Because we can't see it readily and we think light of it.
Very good. Yes.
I think that we are more aware now.
Right.
And it has been diagnosed as some things that we just took as maybe a person being rambunctious or needing to pull themselves up by their bootstraps or whatever. And it's been diagnosed as things such as manic depressive episodes and it was just a long time ago, people just thought a person just needs to get themselves together.
Right. So, and that's a lot of good points. And yes, ma'am, you have something to
I
add?
would say also you have more media attention to some of these horrendous crimes like the Sandy Hook and mass killings attributed to people with mental.
And that is all, everything you said are very good points. And a lot of it is and I'm going to move on to my next one. It's kind of always in the past there was a stigma associated with mental health. So people didn't want, they didn't want to seek help. So a lot of it is we have become to accept it, probably a lot because of the Sandy Hook episodes and stuff, that there is a mental health out there and that it can be helped. and that there is help available. So a lot of things contribute, I think, and the statistics show to why we think it's more prevalent now. It's not actually any more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago. It's just more recognized now. It's properly diagnosed now. Instead of saying, you know, that young man or young woman just has a behavior problem, they need to go behind the woodshed and get a spanking, you know, that maybe there's an underlying mental health issue, and the medical field has, of course, through money, money moves a lot of things along, and they have thrown a lot of money into researching and into diagnosing, into assisting folks with mental health issues. And it's a good thing because it's brought them to light, and it has provided a lot of help to people who need it. And we discussed, people, it interfere with people's work and their lifestyles, and these forward movements we've made in the diagnosis and removing the stigma from being a person, with a mental health issue has made it to where people come forward and they get the help that they need, and they can live with mental health issues. A lot of people in the past would say, oh, word we don't use, that guy's crazy. I don't want to have anything to do with him. And so, but now they realize that's not the issue, that person can be helped, that person receives the proper help, they can lead a normal and normal active lifestyle. So what are some other words? We talked about stigma. What are some other words you hear that you think are like negative connotations for people that we still maybe hear today? Mama was crazy and they are too. That's, yeah. Yes. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Crazy person, know a crazy person.
Yeah, a crazy person, know a crazy person. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Their elevator doesn't go to the top. That's that.
I think the other part of makeup is a spiritual component.
Right.
And I think the spiritual component control everything else. If your mind is not renewed to who you really are, you're going to have all kinds of it.
Yeah, and that's part of, correcting the problem, that sometimes medication gets your mind to where it needs to be, so.
Another stigma is they say they don't have marbles.
They don't have all the marbles? Yeah. So, you wonder why we talk about words in this, and we like to recognize that these are things that we shouldn't say. That's why these are kind of brought up. A typical exercise is they put up the alphabet A to Z, and they make you come up with a stigmatizing word. And believe it or not, it can be done. I mean, that's 26 letters of the alphabet, and you can come up with 26 stigmatizing words for mental health. And those are things that we want to erase and remove, because those are what hinder a person from getting help and seeking the help that they need and being able to live a normal lifestyle. Yes, ma'am.
Another one they'll say is they don't understand what's going on.
Right. They think that they're stupid. A lot of people think, for lack of a better word, they think that they're just stupid. You're not listening, and that's not true. That mental health issues just affect you in a variety of ways. I have to keep moving over here, so. Many people are not well informed. So, and this is why I encourage this 8-hour, mental health first aid is an 8-hour class. So it takes up a lot of your time. If you look on, there's a website, and I'll write it up or get it for you, but it's MHFA.org, and that is mental health first aid website, and you can go on there and find where there are classes, and there's always a class, especially in the bigger cities. There's classes everywhere, and they offer them in one 8-hour day or 2 4-hour blocks to try to break it up some. But it should be on that pen I give somebody. Make sure I got it right. Yeah, actually, if you type it, if you spell it out, mentalhealthfirstaid.org. Mentalhealthfirstaid.org. And it'll, you can have it with you, so I know you're going to get to a class, aren't you? But, all right. Oh, and yeah, okay, she says it's on your, mental health first aid up in the upper left-hand corner of your sheet I give you. If you just take that and put .org behind it, you'll have the website. And that'll, okay. So that'll give you the information, and it'll remove this not being well informed. And it just goes back to the stigmatization of mental health. Is the more you're informed and the more you know what people are going through and how they're suffering, the better off you can help them. I mean, to be honest with you, law enforcement was guilty of a lot of things in the past, you know what I mean? We shoved people off. We did what we had to do to satisfy the moment. And if we could get someone to just, and then of course later on it was, you know, well, what happened over there? Well, that guy's just crazy, you know, and we talk him down enough to move on. And that is not the case now across the country. Law enforcement has changed their views, and we actually go well beyond what is typical law enforcement issue. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed locally here in the media for at least 5 or 6, maybe longer years, you know, our mental health facilities haven't had the funding or the staff that they need either.
Right, and that's...
So it's like if the government doesn't support that treatment, you know.
And a lot of that has changed. I mean, and a lot of it has changed, particularly in law enforcement, because we have what is the crisis intervention team we talked about. We have a state CIT council, and they have actually received additional funding to ensure that law enforcement receives the training they need. Because I'm just going to throw this off the top of my head, but I'll say that probably 90% of the time, the first contact a person has who is suffering from a mental health crisis is a law enforcement officer. That's the first, I mean, we usually are typically the first person that will come into contact with that individual. And if we don't get them what they need, then we've dropped the ball from the beginning. And once we drop the ball, and then, you know, we go to that call and there's 20 other people standing around and they see that we're not doing what we're supposed to, then everybody kind of takes that same attitude. So that is why I know particularly in the state of Missouri, there's been a lot of funding to law enforcement. And part of that funding is not just to train us. Part of that funding goes to receive help. Because we have at our disposal what's called a community mental health liaison. And he is an individual who is typically a licensed counselor. And his sole purpose is to assist law enforcement. So if I come into contact with an individual who's in a mental health crisis, I can call they call CMHLs. I can call my CMHL and he will respond typically immediately. If not, it depends on how the crisis is. If it's an immediate crisis, he will come immediately. He can provide counseling at the time to maybe calm the situation, and then he has additional resources that he can get that person to outside of just law enforcement. So there has been a lot of money put towards getting people the appropriate help. Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes you don't know their mental, in other words, and we use police officers. So we blame you sometimes for things that happen that you do to them, but you didn't know. If you had known, then maybe you wouldn't have done what you did.
A lot of times people with mental health disorders will end up in jail because we didn't know they had a disorder.
I just wanted to bring that up.
A lot of times if they develop a pattern over time, then we'll start looking at it a little bit more and eventually, sometimes we will be able to correct the mistake, you know, instead of just keep
But if it's
putting
your
someone in
first
jail.
time going, you don't know he's mental.
That's absolutely right. That's true.
And that's why we receive that, believe it or not, that 40 hours worth of training that we go to, while by no means does it make anybody, you know, a doctor or experienced to diagnose somebody. But it may give us some clues that when I'm speaking to an individual that I'm looking for, that maybe I want to just make that call to move that forward in a different direction. And then get that CMHL involved, and that he is qualified to make that decision as to whether or not how far we need to move forward. So, did you have a question?
Yes, I was thinking kind of on the same basis she is, and I was thinking about that movie Radio. If you've seen it, and where the cops went and arrested where Cuban played in the movie, and a new cop was on the scene. All the other cops knew about it, but the new cop on the scene didn't know, and he arrested him and took him to jail. So everybody was against the new cop.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's, it's all about, learning to recognize. And for us, it's pretty, the bigger the city gets, the more difficult it probably gets, I would imagine. But where we are in Jeff City, I mean, we know a lot of people that we deal with regular. We know how to handle them. We know how they're gonna react to certain situations. So, and I like to say that while, I use St. Louis, while St. Louis is a very large city, they still have officers broken down into what zones and beats. So they're not responsible for really, if you look at the scheme of people they're responsible for, they're really not responsible for, should be many more people than like Josh is responsible for out on the street. So they should know the people that are in their area, and they should get out and get to, that's what we do anyway. That's particular what our unit does. We get out and we mingle with folks and we get to know folks, and that's the best way to find out. Because to be honest, one of the best ways to find out if someone has a mental illness, what do you think it is? For them to tell us. Exactly. I mean, they'll tell you. I mean, people will tell you. I have depression. You just be surprised. People are more open about it as you remove the stigma and we learn more about it. Did I have a question over here? Yes,
do the police officers have to do a psychological evaluation yearly in order to be on the team, as well as those that are meeting public?
You talk about the actual officer?
Yes.
We have to go through a psychological evaluation when we're, now I'm speaking for Jeff City, I can't speak for any other agency. When we're hired, we do.
But none after that?
None after that. But we do have, of course all this is private, but there are services offered for officers who, face a stressful situation where they can go privately and talk and it's paid for, and that's pretty much the way it is across the country.
That's pretty much optional though.
It is optional. And now it can, a supervisor can mandate it, but pretty much it is optional. Yes,
Is dementia associated to mental illness?
The dementia is actually, like this gentleman had mentioned here, it's actually a disease. Dementia is actually a disease.
Thank you.
We live in the suburbs, and we never see a policeman, a police car or whatever. Maybe once every 2 years or 3 years.
Well, and you have to realize, a lot of times police officers, especially where there's a lot of crime, if you are a lower crime area, you will not see as many officers because they try to focus on a higher crime area. So they, when you're in a low crime area, you'll see an officer less than you will if you, start getting into a statistically high crime area. Yes, ma'am.
If you call the police and tell them that my son is mentally challenged and he's having a breakdown and maybe he has a knife or something and the police come, do the person that comes to talk him down, or they just come and shoot him?
They will come to talk him down, and that would be the situation whether there was a mental illness involved or not. I mean, we don't. Our first line of action is always our mouth. You know what I mean? We listen and we talk before we do anything. And in most mental health situations like that, I know that if that happened in our community, they would call me or somebody like Josh who has had some intense mental health training. And the way things are across the state of Missouri with the mental health training we receive, I know that would happen like in St. Louis or Kansas City because they have very large CIT team. And they have a lot of officers that are dedicated to nothing but dealing with folks who are in a mental health crisis. So if you identify that call involves a person who is suicidal, dangerous, whatever the situation may be, with a mental health, they're going to get a specific officer there to talk to him.
Do you know if St. Louis police also have that training?
Yes, ma'am, I know they do. In fact, St. Louis County, there's a sergeant there named Sergeant Jeremy Romo, and he's a full-time CIT officer for St. Louis County, and he is the part-time state CIT coordinator. So they're St. Louis County, St. Charles, they're all very, very active in CIT. There's a lot of officers in that area that are CIT trained. So.
But what she has said has happened in St. Louis. That's what,
for the
Right.
kids that have communication.
Yeah, yes, I mean,
So you know.
right.
That's why I asked.
Yes, sir.
This training that the officers receive, is there a pass or no pass, or it's just a completion course?
Well, it has, okay, there's not a test, so to speak. Well, you know, actually, I'm gonna retract that. They did just initiate a test, so there is a test, and the state has put mandates that are gonna make it a pass or fail. And now they just started doing that up until, I wanna say, probably February or March. It was an attendance thing. But the state now gives a pre-test and a post-test to see, you know, to make sure that you are within a certain learning standard. And there are other standards involved. You can't miss any of it. You have to be there for the entire 40 hours. And you can be rejected for not paying attention, essentially. You know, I mean, they monitor them pretty close now. So. Anything else? Yes, ma'am?
And now, police have to be, I know they more aware, you have 9/11 tapes now. And that's proof that you told the people, if you tell 9/11, he's a mentally challenged, it comes up on the tapes for proof and all that, because they're supposed to have all that on tape. So 9/11, keep all their tapes.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm out.
Oh, now, yeah, oh, yes. I wasn't with you. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And in the system, you know, law enforcement across the state pretty much works on a computer-aided type dispatch system. So if you deal with a person today that has a mental health issue, that dispatcher will code that in that system, and then if you have to deal with them again, when the officers are headed that way, they will notify them. Yes, ma'am.
When my brother was having an episode, I had called the police several times, and the last time that I called, the police officer really helped me to make a decision on having my brother committed. And he helped to walk me through the process. And once he said to me, "Madam, you have to make the decision." And when I faced up to that reality and actually took the step and had my brother committed and taken to a hospital for, I think it was 36 hours.
96.
96 hours that he can be held at a hospital for counseling and whatever else is done. Now I don't have any more problems with my brother. We're able to communicate. He doesn't make these crazy, there I go with that word crazy, I'm sorry. But he doesn't say things that I feel endanger my life.
And yeah, that's a success story. And remember, when you have someone who needs to be, you know, and it sounds like a harsh word that you're going to have someone committed, but sometimes that's what needs to be done. We do it quite often. Now we do it under emergency situations for law enforcement to do it. We have to kind of have an emergency situation. It's a lot easier for a family member, and when it comes to the actual diagnoses and the treatment plans and stuff, when a family member does it, it means a lot more to a doctor or to a psychiatrist than when a police officer does it. So they know we're doing it because we're in an emergency situation, and they know that. So, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, if there's someone there, to make sure they take their medication and stay on the medication.
And
That helps a lot.
That can be a problem because we deal with several people, you know, they take their medication and they think, oh, I feel fine, so they quit taking their medication. And then once they quit, they don't realize, you know, so it's, and that is a problem because we deal with some folks that live by themselves and they quit taking their medication. And they don't realize that with the majority of these medications, they can't take it now and feel better in a couple of hours. It's a progressive thing that has to get in their system. So they do while they don't know any better, they do a lot of damage by quitting taking their medication. And sometimes the 96-hour commitment gets them back on track. We have a gentleman that I have to do a 96-hour commitment on him probably every month.
Well, lately it's been every month.
Lately it's been every month.
Yeah, at least twice a year.
Yeah. And while it sounds bad, because I'm committing him for 96 hours, it gets him back on track. They take the 96 hours and get him back on his medicine, and he leads a normal life until he says one day, you know what, I don't need to take this medicine anymore, it's making me feel funny, or whatever reasoning he uses, and then after a few days of not taking it, while it takes him, 8 or 10 days to really get in his system and help him in 2 days of it, he's done. So it goes out a lot quicker than he builds up.
Medication sounds like a band-aid effect. It's not fixing anything. You're forced to work right because of the medicine.
So a lot of people say that. So then what happens is, think of it this way: if you have diabetes and you take medicine for that diabetes every year, it makes you be able to live. It's kind of the same type of situation. Without, they say, oh, they become addicted to medication. They can't live without it. I mean, it's a part of life. I mean, mental illness is a disease, and it needs to be treated, and in many instances, it's not curable. It's just something you learn to deal with. Yes, ma'am.
Well, my mother is 91, and she has Alzheimer's. I had never, ever heard of, sundowners?
Sundowners, yes, ma'am.
My mother was, it's terrifying. And if you don't know and have never experienced that, you're talking about mental health problems. I thought something had happened to her and that she had totally lost her mind when she had this. It was the most frightening thing that I've ever experienced. But it was terrible. Now she kind of has them, and I'm aware of it, so I don't get as afraid of it now, and just kind of talk to her and all that. But it's a terrible, really bad thing.
Yes.
A lot of people still don't know about it.
What is it?
It's an outburst. The first time she had it, it's a whole personality change. And the first time she had it, she was in the hospital. So I thought it was like medication. Something had thrown her off. And it was kind of late in the evening. They called us from the hospital, and my mother, I said, well, I thought her health had changed. She had gotten worse. So I'm talking to the head nurse, and I said, well, ma'am, has my mother gotten worse? And she said, no, but you may need to come. I live 35 miles from the hospital. She said, you may need to come up here. It's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, well, what has happened? Well, I could hear all this screaming and all this stuff going on in the background. It was my mother, and she was thinking that bugs were on her and that they were trying to kill her in the hospital, and she was begging me to come and get her. And she told me that if I didn't get there to get her, that she would not be there that morning. She would be dead. And it's just the worst thing I've ever.
So she's hallucinating?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, she was saying they were taking her down to the basement, and anyway, my brother-in-law went there, and of course, how he got her to settle down is he just kind of, she was talking about the bugs on her, and he was saying, yes, Mom, I see them. Okay, I'll take care of it. He was kind of talking and kind of agreeing with her, and she finally calmed down. Well, we get there the next morning, and there were cameras all around, and they had the bed lowered down, and her strapped all up and everything. And it was just the worst thing I've ever seen. But she's at home with caregivers now, and she still kind of has some, but not nearly as bad as she did in that hospital. That was the very first one that she had. And I see her having them now, and she'll have them on us. One time, she had one I was heading on. My sister called me on the cell phone. Don't come. Just turn around and go home. Do not come over here, Carolyn, she said. Because she knew it would really upset me, so she was there with my mother, and I turned around and went back home. But she still has them, and so they're not nearly as bad, and I'm hoping they'll never get as bad as that first one she had, but she still has them. People, if you have relatives that have Alzheimer's, you need to be aware of that. And now I'm getting more information now. Plus, I have a good friend that has given me some information that she had. But now I kind of understand all of this better, but I didn't. And the first time was the most frightening thing that I have ever.
Alzheimer's is a whole different.
It sure is.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
It is a disease, and
Yes.
we don't. And in this mental health first aid class, they don't touch that at all, but we learn about it in our CIT training. But the biggest resource, and this is actually who trains us, is the Alzheimer's Association. They have a training, I think it's a 4-hour training block that covers, you know, what a person's going through, what you may see, and things you may deal with folks who have Alzheimer's. So, but that's the actually resources is Alzheimer's Association.
I never know when she's gonna have another one either. I go over there to visit her, and I mean, I'm on pins and needles, you know, the whole time that I'm there with her.
And they have medicines. My father-in-law died.
She's been on medicine, but she says that it makes her sick and headaches and upset stomach and the 9 yards, so she will not.
And that's, you bring that up, that's the same excuses that folks take medicines will, you know, eating medicines will say.
My girlfriend's aunt had, but what they would do, she didn't take medicine, they would mix it up in her food. And give it to her that way she could, you know, she would be saying she couldn't take it.
Yeah,
that way,
well,
that's how
a good
they
idea
deal.
too, because my mom counts her pills. She knows. She knows. There's a lot of stuff she's got that she knows that she's supposed to have 3 and 8 AM and this, oh yeah, she'll look in her hand.
All right.
That's a good idea.
So I guess I better get back to my slide. Never gonna get through this here at all. So we're back to why we should be concerned. Professional help is not always on hand, so you don't always have that available. And I know in a community such as ours, Jefferson City, our population is right at 60,000 now, roughly 45, 50,000. And that's just in our city. That's not our whole county. That we have 2 hospitals that service, and between those 2 hospitals, we have 1 psychiatrist. And that's it. And he is responsible for everything. He is. And the other hospital has no psychiatrist involved, and then we have the St. Mary's, SSM, they call themselves, 1 psychiatrist. So, and when you talk about long-term health, and it takes that psychiatrist to get that long-term health. Counselors can provide support, but to actually get someone, a guardian, or to get someone, you know, actuals, to say this person needs that intense long-term help, it takes a psychiatrist to sign off on it. And when you're talking about 1 gentleman, you know, to deal with everybody, I don't even know what our county population is. I mean, it's quite large for 1 guy.
You don't have psychologists?
We have psychologists throughout the town, but an actual, he is the licensed psychiatrist. So when you say that when I tell you that we have 1 psychiatrist, we have 1 psychiatrist in a hospital. We have private, but those folks, you would have to make an appointment with yourself. You know, see, when I say 1 psychiatrist, I mean 1 hospital psychiatrist, or I mean to clarify that. Yes. There are psychiatrists that if I want to go seek counseling, I can go to. But if I go to the hospital seeking help, he is the only one. Yes, ma'am. So people don't know how to respond. So again, we talked about this with us. You go there, your words are that guy's crazy. And I can't tell you how many times I see it, you just avoid them. We have some housing projects in town, we'll go there and we'll try to talk to people and they'll say, well, I'm not dealing with that guy, he's just crazy, you know. And they don't want to help you. And they don't want to help him because they're scared of him. So, you know, people just don't know how to respond. And that's what the mental health first aid will do, is teach you how to respond. So people with mental health problems often do not seek help. And it goes back to us talking about the stigma. They don't want people to know that they have a mental health issue. A lot of people.
Not only that, I say this all the time because if that's their norm,
right,
then if you have an issue, you don't realize you have an issue because that's your norm. So it's not always about the stigma, it's the fact that you don't recognize that there is an issue because that's your norm.
And that happens a lot, and I can't really talk a lot about it, but we have a man, a gentleman in town, he has illusions. He's been diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, and he has illusions. And while we talk to him and we know that what he's seeing, feeling, and believing is not happening, it is real to him. It is very, very real to him. And you know, I think a lot of people that we have learned is we don't play. You can't play into his delusions, because he will end up, and this gentleman has started doing this to some level. He makes his delusions a reality. So then he forces what he's seeing, what he's believing, he forces it on other people, and sometimes can become violent and just downright out angry because you're not doing what he wants you to.
You refer a lot to him. That means that there's more males that.
Well, that's just who I'm dealing with. Sometimes when I talk about, I'm talking about a case that's in my mind, and I'll be honest with you, in Jeff City, and I don't have any statistical on my hand to say this, but we deal with more men in Jeff City than women.
I just want to make a comment. A lot of people that are serving on these skilled training, most of them, and have those mental illnesses are very manipulative.
Yes, they are.
And so you really do have to be careful on how you
and that is
play into it.
It's a good
well,
question.
I'm a brother, but I'm a legal guardian now, and mental illness. We've had some mental illness in the family, so lessons have been taught.
And that's one thing, that they stress in these trainings is you need to keep in your mind, while this person may have a mental illness, they're not stupid.
Right.
Just because it's a mental illness does not mean you're stupid. There's some very, very intelligent people that have a mental illness. And some very good con artists I have found in my career that have mental illness. So, yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask a question. You was talking about the psychologist on hand in the hospital. Like, say one of them, like a family member of mine this year, found out they went to a mental section in the hospital. How they actually got there, I don't know. I'm taking it by understanding they went by way of a police officer. What led up to the police officer taking them there, or whether any other body was there with them, they wind up at the hospital. Well, when we hear this, we try to find out where are they. But when you call the hospital, they would not give you any information. And they wouldn't say, yeah, they're here, no, they're not here. Who are you looking for? And I would tell them, and they said, well, we'll see if they're here, and if they aren't. And if they are, give us your information, if they are, and we'll let them get back with you.
That's all part of what they call HIPAA laws, which are designed to protect patient rights. So let me explain it. Just since we're talking about this, let's be at 96-hour commitment workers. So we talked about this.
Get on the mic, please.
All right, better now? Yeah. Keep dropping. So when you get a 96-hour commitment, whether it's a family member or a police officer, a lot of folks think, especially family members think, well, the police are going to commit my brother, my uncle, my sister, whatever it may be, for 96 hours, so they're going to be gone for 96 hours. And that is not the case. What a 96-hour commitment means is that person has 96 hours for someone to diagnose them. So if the doctor can't see him in 24 hours, they can keep him. If they can't see him in 48 hours, so up to 96 hours. Now, if the doctor, and it doesn't have to be the psychiatrist, it can be, they have social workers or counselors for they can refer them on. But that something has to be done in 96 hours or they are released. Now, on the same tone, if the doctor or psychiatrist visits that person 2 hours, and this has happened, we drop him off at the hospital, he visits with this gentleman or lady for 2 hours, and he says she is not a threat, to herself or anyone else, they will release them after 2 hours. So 96 hours just gives them that much time to do the diagnosis. Now, once the doctor does the diagnosis, and this would have to be done by that psychiatrist, he would then petition the court if he sees that this person is suffering from a serious mental illness and needs some help. He would have to petition the probate court for a 21-day commitment. So then he gets a 21-day commitment, and that person goes into structured counseling for 21 days. And once that 21-day commitment is received, they stay for 21 days. There is no, oh, we're doing better than 10, we're doing better than 15. And that is typically a 21-day period to diagnose and to adjust medications and to establish a pattern of counseling.
Now, when is the family gonna know that the police took him to the hospital and all this took place, and the doctor said 21 days, and if you call to the hospital, they're not gonna confirm nor deny that he or she is there.
So let me tell you, there is a solution to that problem if the police are involved. The police department and police departments across, we are not bound by HIPAA. HIPAA laws do not apply to us. So if you call the police department and you say, hey, my brother John Smith, I haven't seen him in a couple days, I know the police was over there, do you know what happened to him? The police can tell you that we got a 96-hour commitment and he went to St. Mary's, because we are not bound by HIPAA. Now the hospitals, when you call the hospital and say, hey, the police told me he was there, they're going to say, they're not going to answer. But it would give you somewhere to start if the police are involved, because we are not. And to be honest with you, if I know that person's there, still there, and you call me and ask me, I can tell you that the HIPAA laws only apply to the medical profession.
They're not allowed to give out that type of
They cannot give out, they can't give out any information about treatment or the treatment that person
Oh, okay, well, thank you for sharing the information regarding the police. What recommendations would you provide to family members if a family member has been taken to a hospital, that they can intervene? Because if they're not giving family members any information, they're making decisions for that individual that might not be in the best for that person. What can we do, or what can we put in place so we can override their HIPAA law? I respect HIPAA, I really do. But what can we do to protect our family members from that law?
It's difficult. I mean, I really, from a legal standpoint, and one thing I have found is if you go to 10 hospitals, 10 hospitals will interpret that differently as to what they can release and what they cannot release.
In my experience, because I've had that happen to me a couple of times, what has happened is I made a contact with the hospital once I knew that that's where my family member was, and I told them who I was. What they did, because they wanted to do the things in the best interest of that person, they go to them and say, can I talk to this person who says that this is their sister, and they get permission from them, and then we go forward.
And once you find out they're there, once you call the police department says, yeah, we committed them, that would be my recommendation, is call a hospital and say, hey, I know the police brought my brother, I need to talk to somebody. And typically a hospital, while they won't be able to discuss treatment necessarily with you, they want what's best for that person, and they should be seeking more information into their, and should give you ask that person, you know, hey, is Joanne your sister? Can we talk to Joanne about coming to see you or something? And then that would open the door to allow them to do this.
In the state of Missouri, everyone has to give what is known as a health directive. That has to happen by law. So you just can't randomly give that information. There has to be a written health directive with starting
for the hospital.
Correct.
Yes.
But what about those things
Well, power of attorney is a whole, that's a whole separate, yeah, that's a whole separate. That's been done in the courts, and I mean, that's a whole.
You said you have to have what?
Power of attorney. If you have power of attorney over someone, that essentially means that you're their guardian and then you make decisions for them. And that's a legal binding document that they have to abide by. Yes, sir.
What, the best thing that I have found in those situations when, if you know that you have a loved one that is suffering from mental illness of any kind, because it's so difficult, keeping track of them and knowing when they're having these episodes and problems, it's best to try to be proactive and become a legal guardian. So you have the legal right to be their caretaker and make sure that they're getting the proper medical treatment. Because that way you can always have access to the hospitals, you know, and to anything. You sign their legal documents so you know. And if they're having episodes and they go to the hospital and you call in, and even if they're real bad off and they're saying, and they check with them and they say, oh, well, can I find out what's going on with them? And if they say no for any reason, which in most cases they won't, but sometimes they will. And if they say no, you still have access because you have a legal document saying that you're their relative and you can take care of them.
And it makes our life easier, because if we try to get a guardian for someone, there's a lot of hoops for us to jump through. In fact, I've been trying to get one for a gentleman now for 6 months.
Everywhere that my mother goes to, all her doctors, all her physicians, the hospitals in Cape Girardeau, they all have a copy saying that I have power of attorney, so that, you know, they can give me all the information if I call or whatever. That's the first thing.
And you can provide that to the
Yes.
hospital when you get it.
So they all have that, every one of them.
Yeah, well, I have, my mother's 97, so I have it also.
Right.
And the doctor has a copy. And whenever I take her to the hospital or whatever, I always take, you know, they make a copy at the hospital. I take it. So all they gotta do is take the records.
Right.
You know, when they put her name in, you know, you got everything there, so I don't have to go through all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
In relation with family history, is any study done with DNA and mental health?
Can you repeat that? I don't hear.
Is there connection between family history, DNA?
You know, I would probably not be the one to answer that question. That'd probably be a medical question for a medical professional to probably answer. And you know, you hear people say, "Oh, I have a family history," but then there is. So statistically, it would be nothing that I can do.
Thank you.
If a person has a problem with mental health, say mental health, and they, you know, been diagnosed and everything, but they are better, can they get a gun permit and then own a gun? They're not supposed to.
There's a question when you apply for a permit. There's a question on the application that asks you if you have a.
Yeah, there is, but I don't know that to check. Like, if you don't answer that truthfully, I don't know exactly.
So if you didn't answer that correctly, nobody will check.
Right.
The thing is, if they do answer truthfully, they are not supposed to be.
Right.
And I think that is correct. I think that if you have a diagnosed mental health issue, they will not issue you. The problem is you don't have to have one.
You don't have to have statements.
So it really doesn't, so anybody can purchase a firearm. Now, there isn't. So there isn't. Not even close. So there technically in the state of Missouri right now, you don't have to have a permit to carry a gun. So there is no checks and balances to prevent that. If I can walk into a store and purchase a gun, that salesperson is just going to sell me a gun, whether I have a mental illness or not. The checks and balances of the permit will wipe away. They're not required.
And see, that's what I'm saying. When you can walk into a store, purchase a gun, then have a breakdown. I call the police, my brother having a breakdown. When the police come, he got the gun in his hand, they fear for their life and they'll kill him.
Well, indeed, there's a lot more would play in there than just having a gun in his hand. I mean, I don't know any officers that's just gonna shoot somebody because they have a gun in their hand. Not where I work. Let me leave other agencies out of that. We'll leave that alone. That's another topic. So approximately 1 in 5 adults in the U.S., 43.8 million or 18.5% experience a mental illness in 1 year. So that's a large number. Does not most people agree? That's a large number. So 1 in 25 adults in the U.S. or 9.8 million experience a serious mental illness.
Yeah.
And approximately 1 in 5 youth, 13 to 18, experience a severe mental disorder at some point during their life. And I can tell you right now, from our experiences and what we deal with, this is an area that is lacking. Now, it's moving forward. I think there's progress being made. The problem is the resources for youth are not as abundant as resources for adults. But it is becoming more prevalent that we are diagnosing, I mean, we're seeing children, even younger than 13 that are being diagnosed with mental illness. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Why?
I think that it goes back to the same thing as with adults, that they just are diagnosing it instead of just saying this child has poor behavior. And I think that even the mental health professional will tell you there's a fine line, they tell us, between what is bad behavior and what is a mental illness. And that again, it goes back to resources for counseling and the psychiatrist. And then you have to get a child psychiatrist. And we don't even have one like on staff in the hospital, actual licensed child psychologist. So diagnosing that becomes a real fine line, and then resources for help are even less.
Anybody and everybody can go out and buy a gun. That's why we're so afraid now to open our doors and go out and walk and do anything, because everybody can buy a gun. You don't even know when you walk up down the street, a 12, 13-year-old kid
Well,
has a gun.
that unfortunately is the issue. You need to call and contact your legislators now.
That is so sad. Call Trump. Listen to it though.
Going back to the now when it's scared that would happen to me. I don't know what to do. Sometimes you forget things, and I think maybe my mom started like that, and sometimes I get depressed. I don't know.
So I know we're not going to get to it now at all.
Don't bring one next time.
But I think she's going to put this presentation where you can see it, and it talks about, there's a just small discussion on here about depression and about how many people actually, will suffer small, bouts with depression, and how prevalent depression actually is. One thing that's on here, and I want to touch this right quick before we go on, is what do we think is the most prevalent mental illness in the U.S.? What's the number one mental illness in the U.S.?
Depression.
Anxiety. It's anxiety. 18.1%, this is all in this presentation somewhere. 18.1% of Americans in 1 year will suffer about an anxiety. So anxiety can be brought about by anything. It can come and go, and you can never have it again. I mean, some people stand up here talking in front of you folks with can suffer anxiety, you know. So it just depends on what can happen to you, and it can come to, and that's why it is the most prevalent. Yes.
Can anxiety be inherited? Inherited?
Again, that's medical, but I would be able to use.
On postpartum, is that considered mental or is it considered a disease?
It is. In fact, if you go through mental health first aid, they will talk about different classifications of depression and postpartum depression is what they talk about.
What I want to know, why do hospitals, when there's a homeless person, they have a mental issue? I have read, of course the news will magnify anything about how they just put them out on the streets with nowhere to go. If they're homeless and have a problem, I know you heard that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them. And it's all resources. And things like that take money. And if they stabilize a person and they're not posing a threat to themselves or society, they don't legally have a right to hold them, even if they are homeless. You have to have a legal right to hold somebody against their will.
It's going to be a vicious cycle because if
Yes.
they let them out,
Yes.
and then they don't take their medicine, don't have resources to get their medicine, or if they have resources, and like you say, they well today, and they don't take their medicine, and they'll end up right back in the same position.
And we see it with a lot of folks. It is a revolving door. It really is.
I just want to share with you about anxiety. I have asthma. I couldn't get air in my lungs, and I got an anxiety attack, and they had to send me to the hospital. The ambulance had to take me to the hospital because I couldn't breathe. So then anybody can get an anxiety.
Anybody can, yes, exactly.
Are you going to be able to?
We're going to try to. That's what we're trying to get to. That's right. I'm going to get the drug out of here in 5, or you're going to get drug out of here in 5.
Excuse me, did you all have any more printouts? Do you all have any more?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, how many do you need back there?
Need about 7? I'll take
Y el que venga a la hora.
All right, some people's not yet. Yes, sir. You need a form. Are they getting you one?
Anybody else need one?
So let's go over this right quick. If you don't have one, you can kind of.
Do you have a question?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Would you please tell me where you can get the information since you were on, too many questions, where we can get the print?
This PowerPoint slide, somebody told me to save it to the computer. And it was
I'm gonna, do y'all know where to go after MIMA to see all the recordings of the sessions that have been held?
No. So you could not get it on printing?
I'll try to show y'all in the big room next time we all get together. But you can go there in about 3 or 4 weeks and we'll have the presentations and we'll have a video of this actual session on the internet.
So hopefully we'll get through this because this is probably getting ready to generate another 30 minutes worth of discussion. So question number 1, it is not a good idea to ask someone if they are feeling suicidal in case you put the idea in their head. How many agree with that? Some people agree that it's not a good idea to ask someone if they're feeling suicidal. So how many agree that it's not a good idea? Okay, so you should have disagreed. Because if someone is contemplating suicide, and you'll get this presentation, and this is in here. that there are criteria for a person who's committed suicide, and if they have committed themselves to that criteria, we're not going to change their mind. Not going to force them into it, let's put it that way. Schizophrenia is one of the most common mental disorders. Agree? Disagree. Very good. Disagree. Schizophrenia is actually the least diagnosed of 0.3 to 0.7 times per year. If someone has a traumatic experience, it is best to make them talk about it as soon as possible. How many agree? I should disagree. You want, sometimes people, and like I said, a lot of this is going to be, we didn't get to cover it, so you want to give people, sometimes they need somebody a little more time to deal with stuff before they're ready to talk about it. Forcing them to speak about it can bring it back up. Males complete suicide 4 times more frequently than females. How many? Males do commit suicide. Yes. There's usually no contemplation there. There's dedication. We kind of discussed this. Antidepressant medication works right away. Disagree. Very good. It is best to get someone having a panic attack to breathe in a paper bag. No. So real fast. When you breathe, you expel carbon monoxide, and if you put it into a paper bag, you're just breathing it right back. So that's enough. Just a bit. Yeah. A first aider, which some of these apply to people who've actually taken the whole first aid class. A first aider can distinguish a panic attack from a heart attack. You're going to be able to learn. Disagree. If you ever have someone that you think is having symptoms of a panic attack, treat it as it, because a lot of you learn in the whole class, a lot of symptoms they mimic each other for a heart attack. You'll always want to treat and get appropriate help for the most serious condition. Exercise can help relieve depressive and anxiety symptoms. Agreed. People with psychosis usually come from dysfunctional families.
Disagree.
Very good. It is best not to try to reason with people experiencing delusions. Agreed. We don't want to try to rationalize. People who talk about suicide don't attempt suicide. Psychosis is a lifelong illness. And you would learn that if we went further and we talked more in depth about it. People with psychosis are more at risk of being victims of violent crime than the general population. That's agreed. Smoking is much more common among people with mental health problems and addiction. Agreed. People with mental health and addiction problems tend to have a better outcome if family members are not critical of them. Very good. Everybody did very well. And I thank you for your time. All the answers until we're in our class, you'll get a lot more information out of this.
Please complete your evaluation and leave it on your table. We'll come by and collect it.